Good morning, everyone. It's Katie Crysdale here. Welcome to Friday, March 5th, 2021. Excited that you're here joining me today. We're going to have a great webinar coming up in about 20 minutes. Thanks so much for being here. I know there's lots of things going on in the month of March. We've got pools starting to get organized for the summer. We've got people returning to work after lockdowns in certain Canadian provinces. We've got pools starting to reopen. We've got those of you outside for the winter in parks, facilities, ice maintenance, hopefully coming back inside. So I appreciate you being here with me on a Friday. Let me know in the chat box where you are from. It's nice to see some names I recognize, others that I don't. So pop your location, remind me where you're located. I'll also let you guys know we do have a giveaway today. So in addition to the normal merchandise that we're selling this year to support the POOLaide webinar, we do have a completely free giveaway today. You will have the first chance at it. So let me pop the link in the chat box and then I'll show you what today's giveaway is. It's only going to be for those of you who are live on the event. So that includes any of you watching right now. It will be, so you guys will be selected by the end of the show. I'll go in and find who the winner is. So if you'd like to be eligible for today's free giveaway, we have a specific post up on Facebook. Not enough caffeine this morning. We have a specific post up on Instagram. If you like it, you follow us and then comment your favorite water slide that you've ever been on, wherever that is. Was it, a childhood water park that's now closed? Was it your first job? There was a water slide. Have you been to Disney World? Have you been to Six Flags? Have you been to Knoxbury Farm? Have you been to a really big water park? What was the best water slide that you ever went on? And I know, speaking for myself, I am a fraidy cat. I don't jump off of the 3-meter tower. I don't like scary slides with drops. I like the little rafting slides with the tubes. That's my jam. So I love the lazy rivers in Walt Disney World, and I love just the old-fashioned rapid rides. I grew up in Ottawa, and outside of Ottawa, we have a small water park at a ski hill called Mont Cascade, right? So the mountain of the Cascades. And what a lot of aquatic professionals don't realize about Mont Cascade, which is just outside of Cantley, Quebec, so you go through the Gatineaus to Mont Cascade. Mont Cascade is actually the beta testing ground for ProSlide, the major slide manufacturer that is based in Ottawa. So Mont Cascade is their property, and often they are testing out new designs for slides or new technology, new tubes, new rider automation, new weight systems. So I had no idea until I recently revisited it as an adult a few years ago that Mont Cascade is a pretty amazing budget, affordable family water park. Not the flashiest, not the fanciest, but definitely an affordable option. So let's look at, I said giveaway, and then I didn't show you what the giveaway was for. So giveaway, we have a bag. Sorry, it's going to be hard to see, but it is a cotton tote bag. If you are me, white is very dangerous. You're going to get scuff marks and dirt all over it, but it's a nice functional bag that you can throw some magazines in, right? Maybe your pool kit if you don't live at the pool anymore. And then along with that, we do have a notebook, comes with it. Whoops, this is not a notebook. Notebook. We've got some new pens. And then, of course, I will also include the patches that we've got this year. So all of the patches are available on our website as well. And I'm going to put that link in the chat box. And then I want to see who's here today. So I see Jen's here from Okotoks. Lots of Okotoks representing this week. I see Joaquin here from, I was going to say Cheerio. A little bit of a mixing there. Joaquin's here from California. And along with the bag, I will definitely include the patches. So this year we had these patches made. Webinars are free, they will always be free, but a lot of people in 2020 had asked how they could support the production of the webinars. And I really didn't feel that Patreon was an appropriate way to go, because certainly my business, Lakeview Aquatic Consultants, it is a for-profit business. And so I do this to give back to the industry. But those who've asked about supporting the webinar specifically, we do have some merch now available on the website. So these little patches are 3 inches, right, for scale, and could go on a towel, or could go on a bum pack, or could go, on an old gym shirt or a weekend bag, whatever that's like. So I'll include one of those. And then we've got the POOLaide patch specifically. So we did the POOLaide logo this year, which I really, really like. And then we have, this is a 2021. And so if the winner today, if you wanted 2020 as well, I will include those. So who knows, if we keep doing this for multiple years, then you could end up with a whole sleeve of patches. So welcome those of you jumping on. I see Anita's here from Saskatoon. I see other names entering the chat box, so let me know where you're located. Want to talk a little bit about the sessions we had this week. Can't believe it's already the end of week 1. So the POOLaide webinars for 2021, we are only here for 5 weeks. We are only doing 14 webinars. We recognize that you have a lot of things on the go, as do we, and that there is too much of a good thing, right? It always makes me think of cookies and chocolate at Christmas, but there is too much of a good thing. And so short and sweet this year, we've got 14 sessions. Next week, we'll be halfway through. This week on Monday, March 1st, we had an excellent session with Caden Seaburn of the 10 Oaks Project in Ottawa, Ontario. They talked about how we can work as aquatic professionals to build better capacity to provide access to our aquatic facilities for LGBT and trans youth. So that was an excellent session. All of the resources are available on our website, on the show notes for that particular page. So if you're not familiar, I think you will be, because you found the link to get registered and attend this session today. But we really got organized this year, and everything is pre-staged, so you can find all of the resources, all of the PowerPoint slides for each show well after. And then you can always go back and grab the recording if you'd like to rewatch it, or if you missed the session, you can always find those on the website. So the webinar recording from Monday is not up as of yet. I am trying to build in a little bit more work-life balance this year. And so recordings, we're aiming to get them up within a week, but not every second day. And I will provide updates if there's delays there. On Wednesday, we had the session with Kathleen Forrestal from the CNIB Foundation, which is formerly the Canadian National Institute for the Blind. She was here talking about her lived experience as a partially sighted or blind person, and what that's like to go to a commercial swimming pool or a public space, a public washroom, what that's like with her guide dog at a crosswalk. She shared a lot of information about different ranges of blindness, the appropriate language to use with an individual who is partially sighted, how we can work to train our staff to not jump in and help them or touch them, but to appropriately work with our customers. I thought it was a really, really great session. Any of you, if you were here on Wednesday or Monday, let me know if you enjoyed those sessions. I thought it was very important this year to provide a diversity of voices. We in aquatics, we love our swimming pools. We're constantly trying to do better. And I definitely, as a consultant, I see gaps in the service delivery that we provide. And I know that as a lifeguard, as a facility manager, I've had people with different levels of sightedness come in to use the facility. And based on my own deficiencies with staff training, or my own deficiencies with allowing staff to understand what rules have some flexibility and what are policies and guidelines, it hasn't always been the best experience for that person that it could have been. So welcome those of you just joining. I see Melissa's here from Elmer, Ontario, which is not too far outside of Ottawa where I grew up. I am based currently outside of Calgary in the town of Okotoks, so just south of Calgary. It's a town of about 35,000 people and provides great access to southern Alberta. Normally, when it's not the pandemic, I do go back and forth between Alberta and Ontario and other places for work, but obviously we are 12 months into a hopefully a once in a lifetime kind of changing experience. So if you have any questions about the webinar so far or any topics you'd like to see in the future, definitely pop those in the chat. Let me know where you are located if you haven't introduced yourself. It's really nice to see kind of what spectrum. We've got already California here, we've got Alberta, we've got Ontario, we've got Saskatchewan. I'm sure we have other people who are joining us today. Our presenter will be starting in about 10-12 minutes, a couple minutes after the hour. Today's presenter will be talking about water slides, but not exclusively about water slides. So if you work at a traditional facility that doesn't have a big fancy water slide, that doesn't have, a lot of fun amenities, you're stuck with, a swim box, that's okay. You can think about the water slide as a metaphor for how we look at our facility, how we critically consider what's going on at our facility. So really excited for that session coming up later today. Let's go ahead and look at sessions coming up next week. So next week is going to be week 2, and we are going to have sessions 4, 5, and 6. So if you're not already familiar with what's coming up next week, I should know this, but even I need to check my paper sometimes. So Monday, we have Katie Crysdale coming back with a session working with different generations in aquatics. So some of you might remember last year, Katie Crysdale was able to fill in for me at the last minute, mid-April, on a session, and she did an amazing job. I think I gave her 90 minutes notice that I needed somebody to either take over the webinar or cancel it because of a medical situation in my household, and she did a phenomenal job. But I definitely wanted to invite her back this year to give her the full experience and really facilitate that conversation piece, the Q&A at the end, because I know that she did a great job, but it wasn't the experience that most presenters get. So Katie Crysdale will be talking about working with different generations on Monday. This is a topic I know a lot of you struggle with. We estimate now in the aquatics industry that there is up to 5 different generations now working in the workplace. And I know a lot of people have struggled with trying to balance between our young 16-year-olds and then perhaps our more experienced lifeguards, senior leadership instructors, managers, programmers in their 40s, 50s, and even 60s or 70s. I know a very capable grandmother who works at the city of Edmonton, and she is as lively and sprightly as most 16-year-olds. So Katie Crysdale on Monday is going to be talking about working with different generations. And I know that's something that I'm really excited to learn about because it's definitely something that's constantly evolving and changing as, the years go by. Coming up on Wednesday, we are going to have Dr. Audrey Giles here from the University of Ottawa. Dr. Giles, I heard her present out in Alberta about 7 or 8 years ago now. She does some phenomenal research on Indigenous swim programs. So in Canada, we call our First Nations populations, so the individuals that were living on the land that is Canada when colonists and settlers came over, we call them First Nations people or Indigenous or Aboriginal communities. And Dr. Giles has been doing research on water safety programs, swimming lesson curriculums, for many, many years, and how there are, I don't want to say white bias, but white conceptions inform how we teach swimming lessons, how we do water safety. And I remember when I first heard Dr. Giles talk about some of her research 7 or 8 years ago, it was just incredible to have that perspective that I, as somebody who grew up in an urban area in a city, of course I'm going to teach water safety differently than somebody who grew up maybe on an acreage, maybe on a farm, maybe by a lake, maybe hunting with their parents once a year. That's going to be really, really exciting. She will be talking about her newest research. And then coming up on Friday is another session that I'm really, really excited about. I know I keep saying that, but every session this year I picked based on a professional interest, based either on the fact that, we need more education in this area, or I want more education in this area, or clients have asked for more education in this area. And the session coming up on Friday is called Person-Centered, Person-Directed Approach to Recreation Programming. And I know that sounds like a bit of a mouthful, but really the genesis of the conversation for this session was I wanted to reach out and do more on the topic of seniors programming. So we're looking at baby boomers and elderly populations living longer. Some are having better quality of care, better quality of life, others are not. How can we as recreation and aquatic professionals reach out to those populations as they become more significant in the demographics of our community, but also recognizing that aquafit is not the only thing we can do for these populations. And often we get stuck in this little pigeonhole of, well, we offer aqua fitness and that's enough. Well, but is it? Right? Is your aquatic fitness at your facility, is it high intensity? Is it low intensity? What are the time slots when it's scheduled? What basin is it in? Is it accessible for individuals with mobility restrictions? Do you have ramps into your pools? Do you have means of entry for those people that have had maybe a hip replacement or a knee replacement surgery? What does that look like? So on Friday, we have two individuals. They don't work directly in aquatics. They do work in the seniors sector, as one is an occupational therapist, one is a recreation programmer at a seniors community. And they were educating me on, regardless of age and regardless of ability, recreation programming should be person-centered and person-directed. So for example, when I go to a yoga class and the instructor says, listen to your body, make modifications, take pause, take water, take rest, that's person-focused. That's not instructor-focused of, you need to do exactly what I'm telling you, or you're not following along, right? You're ignoring the instructor. So having a perspective in aquatics, how can we shift our programming so that we can A, reach more of these populations, and B, as those of us who are able-bodied, whether younger or more fit in aquatics, how can we better understand the challenges that are being faced by these people? So that's what's coming up in terms of webinars next week. Thanks for those of you who've been jumping on this session. We will be starting in 4 or 5 minutes with our speaker. Please introduce yourself in the chat box or your location. I recognize some names. I don't recognize everyone's name. It's really nice to see who's here. So far, we've got California, Saskatchewan, Saskatoon, Alberta, Okotoks, Elmer, Ontario, Loyalist, Ontario, Casper, Wyoming, just down from me. Angie's here from Wisconsin. Angela's here from Maryland. Evan's here from Arlington. So let's get that chat box going. So our presenter is here. We're just going to give them a moment to get organized, and then I will do an introduction. So thank you, everyone who's been joining us so far. I'm going to introduce our speaker, and then I will move off of the screen and into the chat box. So Ryan, I'll just have you mute yourself for a moment while I do the introduction, and then we'll get started. So let me read from today's session, and I'm going to pop those in the show notes as well, so you know where I'm grabbing all of this information. So today's session is going to be transferring practical knowledge from water parks to community pools, and we're talking about water slides specifically. So our speaker today is Ryan Jones. Ryan and I got connected probably about a year and a half ago when he was working at a different company. And then last year he took the leap to forming his own company, which is called Hub Aquatic Solutions. Ryan's background includes 30 years in the planning, procurement, building, operations, and maintenance of aquatic centers and water parks around the world. He created Hub Aquatic Solutions, a unique consulting platform specialized in aquatic facilities to support operators as they explore options, identify and mitigate risk, and create successful facilities. His passion for the aquatics industry has always been fueled by the creative process and the open sharing of experience that make it such a great community. So one of the other things I want to say about Ryan's session that I'm really excited about, I shared a little bit about this on Instagram earlier, the post that you guys are liking for the giveaway. But we were talking about the difference between for-profit aquatic facilities and non-profit aquatic facilities back in the winter. I believe it was October or November. And my background has always been nonprofit, municipal. We're not trying to make profit from our bathers. And I think there's a lot of valuable perspectives that Ryan's going to bring to his talk today. Yes, it's about water slides, but water slides is just one aspect or one metaphor for what a lot of us are doing or trying to do in this industry. So thanks everyone for being here. I'm going to sign off and I'm going to be in the chat box collecting questions for the end. And let's give a big welcome to Ryan.
There, I'll just unmute myself. Thanks, Katie. I hope everybody can hear me because there's not a lot of feedback here. So yeah, it was a great conversation last fall. The combination of the two mindsets, or the ways we look at things. I think operationally we share a lot, for-profit and non-profits. However, how facilities are designed, how features are selected, we felt that there's not a lot of sharing. There's not a lot of communication between those two sides of the industry. So hopefully today is a step towards opening that dialogue. Today we're going to take a closer look at water slides, what they've been, what they can be. I hope to share a different way of looking at this feature. It's based upon water park experiences over the last 3 decades. I'll break down the water slide into what makes it successful. But really, I think the idea is that it's a metaphor for almost any aquatics feature. So even if you're not thinking water slide, hopefully this information or this viewpoint can apply to any feature that you're looking at. It is applicable, the information today, to any size facility. In my experience, there really isn't a huge difference between the largest water parks and facilities in communities of 3,000 to 5,000 people. The size of the features will change, but the process, as you'll see today, is kind of the same. And what we're trying to do in this process is select every feature to exploit its largest potential, ultimately creating the maximum entertainment value that we can. So I'm going to ask you to overlook the scale of the features and the facilities in this presentation. Some of them are big, some of them are small, but everything's scalable. And whether or not it's one slide or multiple slides, today's conversation is more about maximizing the benefits. So I'm happy to take any and all questions. I'm going to ask Katie to chime in with those. And I've put a few surprises towards the end of this presentation that I think you're going to like. Hub Aquatic Solutions. So I started my career on the manufacturing side of things about 30 years ago, and then in operations and planning for facilities. I started in Waterparks about 25 years ago. I've been fortunate to work in several cultures around the world. It's been interesting. Currently, I work for Hub Aquatic Solutions. I'm an aquatics features consultant, and that might be a job title that is kind of new for a lot of people. So I specialize in the aquatic features. My job is to connect people with people and connect people with accurate and current information, mostly from industry. I don't believe that there's ever just one source for the right information. I do believe that discussion leads to advancement in the industry and the creation of great aquatics. So over the last 30 years, diving right in, the water slide has evolved from semi-controlled falling to an enormous catalog of finely tuned ride experiences and exotic effects and theming that we see today. Water slides are a workhorse at more than 2,000 water parks with more than 85 million riders every year. But at their core, it's physics, engineering, and the standards, codes, and regulations that keep us safe and let us have fun. So to oversimplify, what we're doing is converting gravity and friction into entertainment value, revenues, and memories. The earliest water slides, they're not to be used today. In many cases, helmets should have been issued to riders. Riders were largely unprepared for what was in store for them. I've been on a few. I've been beaten up every time. Concrete slides built into hillsides, steel slides in the hot sun. Often we'd see injuries from riders going too fast into curves, bouncing around inside the flume. They hit their elbows, they hit their head, even exiting the flume before the end. So literally it was a 20, 30-second crash course in survival. Science did not play a role in water slides like it does today. So rider mechanics. Quick overview. For those that are new to water slides, the next 3 slides that I'm going to go over are to cover some basics. I'll go through them real quick. If you're a slide expert, maybe it's time to refresh the coffee. I'll go real quick through these. It seems pretty straightforward. The only moving pieces are the rider and water. So pretty basic stuff. But the rider experience, gravity and friction. So think about that. Riders are submitting themselves to the force to make you fall and the force to slow you down. That's the basics of it. To a large extent, our understanding of how these two forces affect the rider's experience is what makes the slide fun. It's what makes the slide safe and what makes the slide so different from what it was 50 years ago. So this is the role of the ride designer. In simplified terms, the ride designer has a toolbox. So he has straight sections. He has different curve sections, tighter radii, more open curves. They have accelerator sections, those little drops to make you go faster. And all these sections can be used in an incredible number of combinations with varying slope. So there's a lot of tools in that toolbox. Simplifying the process even further, a ride designer will take the different slide sections and place them in a specific order. The order will take advantage of the rider's inertia at different points during the slide and affect the sensations that they feel. So it's kind of like a storyboard of sorts, from the top of the slide to the bottom. The ride designer, he or she can speed you up, they can slow you down, they can bank you into a curve. There's a lot of things that they can make you feel. A great water slide will even put these sensations into a particular order to create a journey with a beginning, a middle, and an end. What radius of curve goes at the top of the slide, your first curve experience, and then what's the second curve experience. They will line these things up knowing full well what the riders are going to feel at each stage in the slide. So this is where it gets really interesting. We want everybody that rides water slide to have the best possible experience we can give them. So let's go back for just a minute to the two moving parts, the rider and the water. These are things that are not built into the slide. These are the variables that that change, and one of them changes at the slide itself, and that's variable number 1, the size or weight of the rider. That can't be changed by the ride designer, so he's got to accommodate that into his plans, we'll say. And interestingly, it's variable 2, the depth of the water in the water slide. That's used as a control to keep variable 1 in check. Facility operators, they control the rider experience of speed. Most critically, for those that might be too big or big enough to push the boundaries where it could be a negative experience. And their control is that water in the slide. So a quick recap of the basics. Riders on a water slide are using gravity and friction to have fun. Designers will preset a course with dips and banking turns and G-forces, all for the rider to experience. Then operators function as a final check to keep any size rider within safe limits. It's truly a group effort between manufacturers and operators for the pleasure of the riders, really. So it brings me to, I guess, one of the biggest things for me, that a slide is never just a slide. The quality of the rider experience is so key. It's a direct result of you working with, as an operator, you working with your selected manufacturer to define every step of this slide. They don't just happen, and slides are not inherently safer or inherently more fun to ride just because they're designed. They have to be designed that way with that in mind. So it takes both parties to create a great ride experience, and without both parties, you can't have a great slide, in my opinion. So create a great slide. For those who are thinking of adding a water slide to a facility, I think one of the first questions I get 90% of the time is, where do I start? The first questions are usually, between the owner, operator, and the slide manufacturer. How much space do you have available, or how high do you want the slide to be, or how much do you want to spend? I would argue that is kind of like starting a book at chapter 4. So it's too early to select your favorite manufacturer just yet. So feel free to talk to as many manufacturers as possible. There's no pressure. You're not ready to make a purchase anyways. So start the open dialogue. That's the first step. Excuse me. Now for what to talk about. I've put together the top 3 things I think are a great place to start. So step 1, age groups. What age group are we trying to appeal to? Are we trying to entertain? Knowing the ages of the users you want to appeal to, that will guide the discussion with the manufacturer to specific types of slides. And it will also guide the manufacturer to kind of hone in on what tools in his toolbox he can use to start putting together something that's going to be exciting and something that's going to be safe. A quick example, 8-year-olds are not meant to go on 25-meter tall speed slides, the free fall slides. But they can go on kiddie slides. They can go on family rides where it's designed for comfort and safety for them. So step 1, knowing your age groups narrows the options down a fair amount. Step 2, the intensity of the ride experience. Every feature in your facility, whether it's a lap pool, whether it's a wave pool, whether there's spray features or a lazy river, every feature can be categorized in terms of level of activity. Some features are high on the activity chart, like a surfing machine. You've got to put a lot of yourself into that to enjoy the feature. Others are at the opposite end of the chart, and that's high passivity. So think of a hot pool or a steam room. You don't have to do much to enjoy those. And in the middle between those two, there's a lot of levels that we can aim for here. The excitement level of your slide needs to be determined specific to the age groups that you've selected in step 1. So a couple items to consider is, 1, a slide doesn't have to have just one emotion or just one level of adrenaline. It could be several, a series of levels of adrenaline all put into end to end. And for facilities that are new, if your crowd, the groups that you're attracting to your facility for this feature, if they're not overly familiar with water slides in your region, maybe you want to just tone it down a bit to start. And a quick side note, this is the step where facility planners get the information they need to balance out the activity levels throughout the entire facility. Because facilities are not all full adrenaline all the time or fully passive all the time. Not community facilities anyway. Step 3, based on the installed capacity of your facility and your knowledge of peak attendance times during the day, we can get a good sense of your required instantaneous capacity, and that's the number of swimmers in your facility at any given moment. From instantaneous capacity, how many swimmers in the age groups you've selected for your slide, we've narrowed down the size of the group, right? So in summary, with these 3 steps, you've effectively determined who makes up the group you're looking to entertain and what slides or features are available to entertain them. So the hard work is essentially done. And when you start talking with manufacturers or you start going to their websites, you start getting into this a little bit more. If you don't have a manufacturer on speed dial, this is kind of new to you. Here's some of the terminology you're going to run into. Serpentine slides, basically open body slides, or enclosed body slides, the tube rides. There's inner tube or raft rides, speed slides. There's body speed slides and there's enclosed speed slides. There's multi-rider inner tube speed slides. For kiddie slides, in fact, almost everything that exists for bigger people exists in a smaller version for kids as well. One of my favorites is a gang slide. It's where multiple, sliders go down at the same time. Then you get into the funnel rides and the half pipe rides, bowl rides. There's a lot out there. So if it seems like there's too many things going on here at once, there's a bit of a hodgepodge of features or slide options. I invite you to try and see them as different categories of experiences for the riders. There's high adrenaline rides, there's medium adrenaline rides, there's single rider rides versus multi-rider rides. Body slides, where you ride in your bathing suit, or inner tube rides, where you ride on an inner tube. Some of the starter slides, they'll be designed to satisfy multiple age groups at once, be more middle of the road perhaps, in terms of activity and passivity. That's a great place to start. Other rides are going to be anchor rides designed for wow factor. They draw crowds in from generally a larger territory if you're looking to really stand out from your regional crowd. But facilities don't generally start with an anchor ride. Again, just to recap what we said at the beginning, most of these will be scalable. They don't have to be like you see in the marketing pictures. Not every slide needs to be 20 meters tall, 300 feet long. A lot of them are scalable, so we'll get into that a little bit later. Popularity. We want to add a slide. We want to, entertain crowds. We want to draw in crowds. We want features that can pack them in, essentially. So slides can do this. Slides can definitely draw in crowds. And when a water slide's the best in its region, it will be popular. That's proven from Waterparks, and it's proven from several community facilities that have done it very well. Typically, most slides are going to be most popular or extremely popular even when they're new. There's the new factor there. But long-term success is always the goal when you're planning. So I've heard some people recently, and I think I might have mentioned this to Katie in recent months, say that the novelty can wear off of a slide, and the popularity is going to wane over the first few years. But I would argue that Waterparks have shown us that quality water slides with a great rider experience, they hold their value very well for the entire life cycle, 20, 25 years. So the key is a great rider experience. Now, if you're in a competitive environment, so in a region where there's other good water slides, I'd say no problem. There's always options. There are so many options to choose from. I always say, never repeat what other facilities have offered your swimmers. There's too many options to choose from. There's so much creativity from the manufacturers. There's absolutely no reason to mimic or to try and copy somebody else. So if you're looking to take it to another level, even because there's other good slides, you're going to be really impressed when you start looking at the manufacturers, looking at what industry is working on and what they've come out with most recently. Some really cool stuff out there. And that's where I want to go at this point. If we build on a strong foundation of a quality ride experience, again, I can't stress that enough. It starts with a quality rider experience, and you have to have that. That's given to you by the slide designer. But there's special effects now. There's add-ons, there's upgrades that are designed to enhance the rider experience. They don't take the place of it. They've introduced light, through windows, through LED, through even fiber optics. They've introduced sound, they've introduced fog, they've introduced water curtains, they've introduced water curtains with imagery on them. Now it's too new for these special effects, in my opinion, to say that the effects alone will maintain the popularity of a slide for its full life cycle, 20-25 years. So again, add that to a great rider experience, and we've got some exciting things to play with now. These effects, these upgrades, let's say, they do add versatility to programming. Certainly they're a competitive advantage in most regions, especially for community centers. They're an exciting alternative to the other slides that you've got nearby. They're very strong marketing tools. They enhance the overall experience, I would say, for the facility. And that's just a superficial look at it. So as far as pricing, I do get asked for pricing a lot. What I've seen from the effects, they range from significantly less than you'd expect to about what you'd expect. I always let the manufacturers share their own pricing. It's not, for me to do that. But if I were pressed, I'd probably say it's really not a big ticket item to get the upgrades, right? So with all the stimulation kids are feeling today, at home, and they're at home a lot now, what they see in their daily lives, can we really impress them? I'd say yes, definitely yes. So the visual sensation is pretty powerful, but water slides, and with a great experience, and now with the options that for effects that they have, these provide active attractions for riders to experience. They're physically interacting with it. That's not the same as being at home and seeing something. So getting riders to process multiple senses all at the same time, certainly these effects and these slides are ramping that up. And a lot of these senses, I'll remind you, that are being controlled by the ride design or the feature itself. They don't have control over it. So that's a whole nother level of fun that definitely worth exploring what all the options are. And the next level of effects is, after the lights, after the fog or the sound, now you see it's getting heavy on imagery, on changing scenery, interactive electronic games. One slide I worked on in the last few years was actually for a gentleman's house, and I cannot imagine a better birthday party add-on to a water slide than having competitions in the slide, who can touch more buttons on their way down the slide, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But there were so many options with those systems. It wasn't just one game and off you go. So themed slides available today are fulfilling one of the cardinal rules of amusement parks, and that's to provide an experience you just cannot get at home. So with effects, we can impress. It's clear to me. We can stimulate the senses in a lot of ways. We can enhance the basic ride experience. And another approach that has come out in the last couple of years, I think it's just as exciting, honestly. It's the total absence of this kind of stimulation. So clear water slides, and not translucent, but absolutely clear. They give riders a whole different experience. For me, it's, think about the sensation of standing 15 meters in the air and just looking down. Add that to all the other sensations the water slide's going to make you feel on the way down. I think it's an enhanced ride for sure. So what has me the most excited about water slides today, 2021, is that there's so many tools in toolboxes. There's so many talented industry players out there. It seems almost inevitable to me that we're going to reach a point where stories are told. And this will merge a little bit with other dry attractions. So if we take a strong foundation of centrifugal forces, of G-forces, of accelerations and high banking and curves, and enhance every one of these sensations with the right or the most fitting effects, I think that's an opportunity for a road to go down here now that the tools are there. Slides can take riders on a journey that will combine senses, that will confound them, impress them, excite them, teach them. I mean, sky's the limit now on what we want people to feel inside of an aquatic feature. Slides will tell a story, hopefully a story that riders won't soon forget. We could tell the story of the history of your community, through the multimedia in a water slide. We can take trips through space. We can get into the SpongeBob or the Avengers environment. There's really no limits to great storytelling there. So if I were to add one more reason to talk to manufacturers directly, I think every manufacturer that I know, and I work with essentially all, that's what I do for a living, they all have a curtain, let's say. And behind that curtain is their pipeline, their development, what they're working on, where their creativity is taking them, where their vision of the future is taking them. This is where the newest, coolest things that you haven't even imagined yet are happening. And this is where these manufacturers are resolving. They're finding solutions to problems that, we didn't think 5, 10, 20 years ago that we could solve these problems. One example of that is there's at least one water slide manufacturer, this is a global manufacturer, so it's available in your region, is working on accessibility and inclusion on a whole nother level for water slides. So take that as the 20% of our population that has difficulty, identifies themselves as having difficulty getting in and out of a pool. Soon maybe we'll be able to enjoy the water slides, something that's been off limits for them to a large extent. There's another manufacturer who can effectively tie into your decor, your theming seamlessly with every texture and every pattern, from wood to steel to floral patterns to anything you want. And maybe it's funny that we're back to concrete and steel water slides again, because that was kind of the origin. So to recap on the basics, a water slide, just like a lot of features, plays a big role in the success of a community aquatic center. The water park industry has shown us, they've proven that there is benefit to looking very closely at how individual features are meant to perform and what they're supposed to do. And that's beyond even just the ride experience. They'll draw in guests. Yes. They'll promote repeat visits, more frequent visits, so a higher frequency of returns for visitors. They'll increase the length of stay, and that can have a direct and indirect result or a benefit to revenues. They're modest consumers, I would say. Water slides are definitely on the lower end of O&M resource consumption. They have very long life cycles, and if we analyze, the resources we need through operations and maintenance per user, you're going to find that it's actually a very economical feature to have. They're not difficult for staff to master either. I think that's a key thing. They're not overly complicated. Science does most of the work for us. Provide a strong variety of memorable experiences. So to set your facility apart from other facilities, it helps to create memories. It helps to inspire the want to take your selfie there. If people in your facility are looking for a corner of your pool room or your hallway where they can take a selfie and have your facility as the backdrop, I think that tells you something. If nobody wants to take their selfie there, maybe that tells you something different, right? So they do add a lot. And I would just say, it's worth looking at it. Definitely talk to the manufacturers directly. They have a lot to share. I don't have a horse in the race. Talk to them all. They're all great. And that concludes this presentation. Katie, thank you very much for inviting me on to talk today.
All right. I want to expand on a lot of the great ideas that you brought up that I think are going to be new for people. So I'm going to leave your screen up for just a second with your contact information. But can you talk a little bit, Ryan, about, I love what you said, the balance of activity levels around a facility. Can you expand upon that a little bit more, what that looks like at a regular community pool that's not a water park?
Right. So if we think in terms of each feature will appeal to a certain age group. But in that age group, not everybody is hyperactive or super involved. Sometimes we want to be a little bit more passive or a little bit more relaxed. So to have a balance of activities that our users, our crowd can enjoy based on, I kind of feel like I want to relax a little bit more today, or I'm gung-ho. I have options to bounce back and forth on. And then we take each one of those features balanced for level of activity, level of passivity, and we combine them with the other features in the facility. We want to provide options. I think the easiest way for me to explain it is in a spray park. The way I learned it for water parks was every time a kid comes off of a little slide or a spray feature or comes off of an activity, they should be able to stand up, look around, and identify the next place to go, and hopefully have options, right? So we know that users will come and use a lap pool, and they'll swim laps. That was their goal. That's what they wanted to do. But they might stay for the hot tub, or they might enjoy another activity there, right? If we can keep them involved, if we can give them entertainment options or activity options, you'll find that it will actually have a direct impact on how long they stay, how often they come back, because each visit to the facility could be different.
So let's say I'm on a fixed budget and I've got a box pool and I've got a hot tub and I don't have any money for new infrastructure. Could I maybe look at doing this with, I guess, how I'm programming the space, or with signage, or, what people are doing? How would you do that, do you think?
So, yeah, I think programming is key. Programming is paramount here. How you use the features you have requires the expertise of programmers and the people who make that happen every day. Features don't work on their own. How we use, we'll just think of one of the most common features, or the most common feature, is a pool. The depth of the pool, the temperature of the pool, whether or not there's extra jets on one side, all of these things are going to influence the user experience. If we know how the pool can be used in 10 different ways, then we can set programming by hour or by age group accordingly. So superficially, it just looks like a pool. But to a programmer, that's 10 different activities. When you buy a pool, ideally, you want to anticipate the 10 or 20 or 30 things you can do with that pool and incorporate all of those into the original design, giving your staff more tools in their toolbox. Because without good programming, you won't have a successful community center. Right.
Well, and I love what you said about age groups, and I think that predates to our previous conversation when this topic first got launched. It was just like I'm picturing the mind-blowing emoji, right? To think about age groups and not function. Because when I did programming, I thought, okay, I need some lap swim, I need some swimming lessons, I need some open swim. I never thought about ages, right? And how much of that is the nonprofit bias that we're not revenue driven, and how much of that is just getting stuck in doing things the same old way. Why do ages matter in your experience, Ryan?
So if you go to a water park and you've planned for this, you're going to take the whole family, and you've got a young child, we'll say less than 5, another child less than 10, and another child less than 15, just to randomly split up the age groups here. And you've got a couple grown-ups, and you've got the grandparents. So you've planned for this outing, you're excited about it, everybody in the family is excited about being there, and you're going to spend the day. That's the plan. But when you get there, the activities that appeal to the 3-year-old are not necessarily going to jive with the 14-year-old. If there are no activities, there's no features designed for the 3-year-old, the 3-year-old will have to tag along with somebody else. After a short while, I think you can imagine what the 3-year-old's going to be saying. I want to go home. This place sucks. By the same token, we can't expect a 14-year-old to go into the talk pool and say, dude, you've got 3 hours, have fun, have a blast. The fun will last about 30 seconds. It's not designed for them. So we know that features have appeal to specific age groups. A lot of features have a great appeal to multiple age groups, which is a great thing. And how those features are used in the case of a pool, or how they're designed in the case of a feature like a water slide, we know that we can capture the attention, we can entertain, we can interact with those age groups specifically and not leave anybody out. One of the things, sorry,
go ahead. No, you finish.
One of the things, I don't know if you'd agree with me, is that I've seen in facilities, across Canada, some facilities, I'm going to say a small amount, say, well, we've got something for the seniors. Hot tubs over there. Well, there's more to life being a senior than, marinating in hot water. By the same token, what do you have for toddlers? Well, we don't get many toddlers here. Well, they don't buy tickets. I get that. So maybe there's not much record of them. But if you had features for them, they would definitely be there. And they would stay longer, right?
Yeah, no, and I think that's a big thing that I wanted to make sure we covered in this kind of back and forth. And if anyone has any questions, please do feel free to pop those in the chat box. But I know I've experienced this a lot, as have you, Ryan, that a pool gets to the end of a budget year and maybe they have a surplus or they have a grant. And I see these posts on Facebook, or I get a call, somebody says, I have $25,000, what can I buy and get it delivered in 6 weeks so I can use this money? And I've been in that position as a municipal facility manager. I get it. But the thought process is, what is the most that I can get with my money? Not, as you've been saying, what ages are we not serving? So No different from accessibility when we had our blind speaker on Wednesday talking about, well, blind people don't come here, we don't need to accommodate them. Toddlers don't come here, we don't need to accommodate them, which doesn't really give credit to the consumer who's going through a whole decision-making process that eliminates your facility. You're just not aware of that because they never come to your facility, right? So what are some basic tips when people have money to buy something that what are tips that you're engaging people to consider?
I think step one, there's risk in this. And the risk to me is you're going to buy something thinking that you're achieving a goal, thinking that you're appealing safely to an age group, and you're going to provide entertainment value. But just the simple fact of purchasing it and having it installed does not guarantee safety and entertainment value. You still need to have the conversations with your manufacturers. The feature that you're eyeing may, it was attractive to you. That's why you zoned in on it. It may satisfy that. It may be safe and it may be highly entertaining for the age groups you want. But you still need to verify that, right? If you're going to carry lumber back and forth from Home Depot to your house every day, that will guide the car that you buy. Chances are it's going to be a truck. Well, adding a water slide or adding a spray feature, for what age group is it? Do you have only passive entertainment options? Maybe you want to add a little bit higher level of activity, something with a little bit of adrenaline. It doesn't have to be a 20-meter high water slide in every scenario. It can be a small slide. It can be a toddler slide. But you have to understand the slope, you have to understand the mechanics, you have to understand why it's safe, why it's entertaining. And then when you have that installed, some of these are available in catalogs, readily done. Then when you have it installed, you have the absolute certainty that your staff will be able to operate it and take care of it, and it will do what it's meant to do, entertain safely, right? So still have the conversation, regardless of what feature catches your eye. And there's a million features out there. If you saw one thing, don't stop. There's a million more. And you'd be surprised. Yeah.
I think slides are so timeless that people don't want to install them because they think they're not trendy enough. So when I look at the pools, either locally in Alberta where we're both located or just generally, people seem to really latch on to the new trending topics, whether it's, the aqua pole or the aqua bike or the not the motocross, but the obstacle course system or a climbing wall. And a lot of people, they want to have these trendy things. And then a couple years go by, and every pool I've ever visited, both as a consumer, like a bather, and as a consultant, most of the lifeguards report that very few people use the climbing wall and it's not very popular. And that's not to knock a climbing wall, but it is one of those things that people get an idea in their head that this is what I want. Like I, as the aquatic professional, want it, and they really haven't considered the community demographics. Or as you've said, Ryan, like what other pools are close to me and what do they have?
Exactly. There's so much available out there to make a different offer to your people. If you're attracted to a climbing wall, great. But don't stop at a climbing wall is a climbing wall. There are a few different manufacturers. Some will offer perhaps more versatility on changing where the handholds go. Maybe that gives you, it buys you a longer life cycle because you can change up the experience. And again, the key is the experience that you're giving them, right? So every feature will have validity. Every feature will have a user experience or a rider experience. Guide your decisions more on that and less on filling space on a deck.
I want to shift gears a little bit, Ryan. One of the common questions that I often get, that I often punt to you, is, people have some water slides in their facilities, whether it's the little toddler slide, $1,500 movable sitting on the deck, or whether it's a $50,000 just a shorter slide all the way up. What is basic maintenance that you see, or basic daily checks, safety inspections that you see at the big water parks that we could partially adopt in our smaller pools? Because I see a lot of people are not inspecting their slides at all, ever.
and it's worrisome. I'd start first with what slides are made out of. Essentially, there's two community center water slides, plastic and fiberglass. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of the plastic because I think it needs to be checked and operated properly, and you have to understand what the risks are because they are slightly different from a fiberglass slide. So not all joints between slide sections are the same from one plastic slide manufacturer to another. Perhaps the easiest way for me to say this is not all of them are made by manufacturers who understand water slides. Some of them are made by dry playground manufacturers, and that's a different ballgame. It's a different slope. People are using it clothed with shoes versus a bathing suit and exposed. You've got to understand what you're getting into before you get it, and then you can take care of it and operate it safely. We've seen too many slides that are dry playground slides and are way too fast, and they shoot people into the corner and they flip them into the pool rather than introduce them into the pool. So start with what kind of slide and what slope, and is it made for a pool? Even some of the economical slides, they're a lot more dangerous than we would expect when we purchase them. But the simple daily check is a big one. One of the tricks I learned a long time ago is to constantly look at the back of the riders. Is it red?
Oh, like my back. Okay.
Yeah. So when a rider comes off your slide, you're always looking at their back to see if it's red. And it's a paranoia, perhaps, that, as a slide operator, I don't want to be hurting anybody. So I want to look for any sign I can get. And that's during the day. But at the beginning of every day, the best tip I ever had was the least expensive one. And it's essentially you take, a paint mixing stick or a little stick of wood, you cut it into a square. And as you're going up the slide, you'll just gently rub it back and forth over the slide joint. If it skips on the way up, the piece of wood, generally speaking, riders will be fine coming down. It's unlevel, but the high side is higher, so it'll be a drop for riders rather than the opposite. If it skips, the little block of wood skips on the way back down the slide, then you know that that's what people are feeling on their backs. So at the beginning of every day, is the slide going to be comfortable, or am I going to be, causing red backs and potentially worse? As far as more monthly or yearly checks, I think the most obvious things are misconceptions about the role of caulking in a water slide joint. It's waterproofing, yes. It's so that water stays in the slide and doesn't drip onto your deck. But that little bead on the inside surface that we can see from the inside of the slide, that's not all of it. That's essentially the least of the caulking. There's more caulking in that joint, right? So I see a lot of facilities try and put more caulking in there, and it has to look like it's smooth, but it's actually not. And it's not something that bathing suits slide over easily. So you're just causing yourself a mess and a bit of trouble. The other thing I see is the hardware on the outside, the stainless steel nuts and bolts, the fasteners. They're not that hard to keep clean, except for they're up in the air. There are a few specialized companies that will do slide maintenance and that are very good at what they do. And they will look at all of these things for you, generally on a yearly basis. So once you establish your steps, and they always start with the manufacturer. Manufacturers have a list. So not every slide's the same. Start with your manufacturer. Keep that communication going after you bought a slide. They will provide you with the start list of what to be looking for and how often. And a lot of times it will even include remediation steps. Be it you can do this by yourself or you call us because that's something we need to do.
But I like what you're saying. At a minimum, the slide is dry at the start of the day. I can have a headlamp, I can have a stick, I can use, bare hands and be checking the interior of the slide. And I think that's something that, it takes 5 minutes on a walk around if we're talking a really long slide. If you plan that in as part of your day, that's a big one that I think a lot of facilities are not doing. And then they're surprised when, as you said, Ryan, somebody comes into the first aid office with a big gash that could have easily been avoided and nobody's looked at the slide for weeks. I know as a consumer, that's one of the first things that I check, especially if I'm staying at a hotel, before I turn the water slide on. If there's a switch for the consumer, I look at it. And then another thing I see often as a consultant is people not realizing that all water slides are different, as you've been saying in this session, and that there is a data plate on the water slide from the manufacturer that clearly says the weight restriction and the height minimum. And I've been in hotels, I've been at public pools where the signage posted by the facility does not correspond with the actual weight and size rating from the manufacturer. And that is an accident waiting to happen, because everything is in accordance with manufacturer specifications. Your facility is not going to be covered if you let someone bigger or smaller onto that facility.
Have you ever seen the spiral slides that are in so many hotels nowadays? There's different names for it, and I won't get into brand names. I could show you 2 slides in a picture, and they would look identical to you. They're both spiral slides. They have the same number of loops. But from experience, I know that one of them hurts people. It's too fast, and it shoots people into that pool so crooked. And the other one, on the face of it, if you don't know, it looks the same, but the slope is more moderate. It actually takes a slightly larger footprint, but not by much. You can't tell unless you ride the slide. And that's, I think, a big lesson. When you get on the slide and you ride it down, so lifeguards, do this regularly. You'll know if you're banging your head in curves. Curve number 3, I always hit my elbow. Or it shoots me into the pool so darn fast, it takes me longer to get out of the way, to get my bearings and get out of the way. So from one manufacturer to another, the slides might even look the same. They're going to act differently. And then from one design to another, they're going to act differently. Get to know your slide. You do have some controls. Don't ever forget that the amount of water that you put on that slide for the riders is your control. You can slow them down. You can speed them up. You can do what you need to do. Now, typically you would do that during commissioning when it's new, but don't stop doing it. Don't stop keeping your eye on that a 280-pound person going down is not going to slide at the same speed and not going to have the same experience as an 8-year-old who weighs, 40 pounds when wet. So that's your control to make sure both are kept within a range of safety.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. That was one of the things I wanted to make sure we covered was, just as you said, the water speed. People not even realizing that pumps are adjustable, and it obviously at the construction, you may not be involved in construction. You might be maintaining a pool with a slide that was added 20 years ago. But like any piece of pool equipment, the motor can start to fail, slow down, the impeller can get damaged, there can be blockages, there's more flow, there's less flow. If you're not actually checking the output or that water flow speed several times in the season or the year, I mean, you have no idea if something falls out of whack until somebody crashes through the end of a run out or gets hurt. Or, as I'm sure you've encountered, I've heard stories where customers, they lather themselves up in soap to try and get a little bit of extra speed, and it has terrible consequences.
The surface of the slide, think about it. This is a feature that's going to perform 20, 30 years in a facility, and you may or may not have kept it terribly clean. If it helps, think of it like cleaning your car. You wouldn't generally put anything on a water slide that you wouldn't use to clean your car, but we can imagine a slide that's 30 years old and has a lot of buildup on it. It's got a different friction rating than a brand new slide that's recently, waxed and polished. So the amount of water you are controlling has to be based on what you're seeing from the riders, how the riders are reacting. Not to, well, I have a slide, it was always set at 60%. The pump valve was always set at 60%, so we keep it at 60%. Well, that has changed over time. Again, it's not because a water slide's a water slide. It's because your water slide is a particular thing. Get to know it, get to operate it, fine tune it. You can. There's not a lot of moving parts, but you can make adjustments along the way. They've given you that safeguard as an operator. They're safe features. They will last a long time. They will perform to a very high degree, even when not kept terribly clean, or even when there's a couple drips coming through a joint. It's a noble feature in that sense, right?
As long as it's built correctly. And I'm sure we could spend a whole hour, which we won't, talking about water slides that are hack jobs, right? People invent their own water slides. In preparation for this session today, I have an HBO subscription and I watch the documentary Action Park, right? Because I'm too young to remember or have heard of Action Park. So those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, this can be your homework for this weekend. HBO is licensed in Canada with Crave TV, and they do have this documentary called Action Park about a park in New Jersey. Ryan, do you have any comments? Have you seen it? Do you have any stories related to Action Park?
I'm going to avoid
no comment.
The urge. I mean, you get into a scenario sometimes where we know that manufacturers played a role in a process to put a slide in. We know that owners played a role, operators played a role, installers played a role, weather maybe played a role. I mean, there's so many things, and if you don't know the whole story behind one particular slide, it's easy to follow into a trap of, well, so-and-so is not a good slide manufacturer. Get to know all the stories, I've seen slides operated very well. One of my favorite parks, as far as theming goes, partly because I had a very tiny role in it, had an Egyptian theme, and it was shut down, I think, prematurely for what was expected for its life cycle as a water park. Another water park, very well known in the States, had a graduation day, stories we hear about, and 16 kids get in a train, one behind the other, and lo and behold, in hindsight, maybe more supports, or maybe definitely it was outside of operational parameters, but a slide breaks and people fall, and we read into that. So I can tell people stories one-on-one. I think the caveat is I don't attribute failures or successes to one party. There's always a story behind it that you need to get to know. And just to touch on a point you mentioned earlier about the soap, never, ever, ever liquid soap in the bathrooms of an aquatic center that has a water slide. Mm-hmm. To lubricate a body will make it go faster. And as a guard, as a slide operator, you do not have the luxury of a reaction time to adjust the speed of the water to compensate for a kid who may have set themselves up for a very fast ride beyond safety parameters. So it's one lesson I learned from one incident. It was a horrible story, but if we take anything from it, you have a community facility, a community aquatic facility, and you have bathrooms, change rooms adjacent to your slide area. Don't use liquid soap on the wall. Use the foam, use something else, but don't use the liquid soap.
Yeah, I've worked enough pools in my lifetime to go in as a lifeguard. I'll walk through the change rooms and you see the soap piled on the counter, like the dredges of somebody who's been pumping the whole bag out. And it's, hot tubs the same way, trying to get a foam experience. But yeah, if anybody has got any questions, please feel free to throw those in the chat box. We're going to start to wrap up. The last thing I wanted to say about the Action Park documentary, just for those of you who don't know what it is, I should have just explained, it was a park that was closed in New Jersey, and it had a variety of slides that it's hard to say in hindsight, but were either self-constructed or partially constructed with real parts, and there were a number of injuries and a number of deaths that ultimately led to the park being closed. But I mean, that's not the only injury. I'm sure Ryan has stories that he could share one-on-one, or in a general setting. I'm sure many of you remember the terrible tragedy in Kansas City 5 or 6 years ago with the Verrückt slide, right? And that's obviously a different type of water slide, and there's been a lot of court cases surrounding that. Who's responsible? Who designed it? Who built it? What video footage exists about failed trials or otherwise? I don't know the whole story, but it's just important to understand that any equipment can be unsafe if it's not operated and maintained and spec'd appropriate to your facility. And I think that's a great point Ryan's been making is we see a lot of these posts, well, what should I install? What should I buy? We're not as consultants trying to push ourselves down your throat to buy our services, but there's really more to it than just off the shelf, out of the catalog. Any final thoughts, Ryan? Anything else you want to add that we haven't covered?
I think with any aquatic feature, get inspired by the feature itself. Ask the questions why. Get into it. For me, it's exciting. It's always been exciting. I think in the water park industry, a lot of us maybe fell into it from other things, and then we're just inspired by it. But a pool doesn't just function as a pool. A pool means something to people, and it means different things to different people and different things at different times of the day. So now there's a whole world to explore just with a body of water. Well, it's going to be the same or more with water slides. We know now what makes them safe. We know now what makes them fun. And we can share that science from the manufacturers to the operators. Have the dialogue. Can't hurt. You're going to learn a lot. I think it's exciting. And you'll ensure the success of a facility. You'll be able to ensure that it will be fun and absolutely safe because you had these conversations. You got deep into the features and hopefully you enjoy it as much as I do.
Well, and I think be inspired, like Ryan said, there's so much now on Instagram. I love Instagram in part for this aspect of our industry, looking at the different designs, the water parks, without having to ask for a catalog or ask to speak with a brand. There's so much available on Instagram. I've posted a lot of the slide manufacturers directly on the show notes for this page, but keep looking at links and reshares because even Ryan was mentioning earlier, accessible equipment, accessible slides. I happened to get on a whole thread this morning and saw that Morgan's Wonderland in San Antonio, Texas, which is the only 100% accessible amusement park that I'm aware of in North America, including the water park. It's intended for wheelchairs, for those with autism, sensory disorders. They're just reopening today after the closure that they've experienced during the pandemic. And it's just exciting to see what we can do in this part of the industry. I think I appreciate, Ryan, you've shared a lot of that with us today.
Oh, and a shout out to Morgan's. They don't know me. I've never worked with them. And secretly, I've been following them online
We all are, yeah.
forever. And it's so exciting because they do things thinking of the users. Fantastic. Yeah. No, thanks for your time, Katie. And thanks to everybody for listening.
And if you're not familiar with Morgan's Water Park, look them up. I will post, they have a short video tour on YouTube that I'll repost to the show notes over the next couple days, but really heartwarming, inspiring facility if you want to, see an organization that's doing something really good in aquatics for populations that often don't have their needs met in our traditional facilities. So thank you to Ryan. I'm going to let Ryan head out now, and I'm going to give just a little recap what's coming up next week in our sessions. So kind of what's what. Next week, we have 3 different sessions. Where is my calendar? Next week on Monday, we have Working with Different Generations in Aquatics. That is going to be Katie Crysdale talking about all of the different generations in the workplace and giving you some tips and strategies how to juggle those different needs. Coming up on Wednesday, we have considerations for aquatic programs and initiatives with Indigenous communities. So Dr. Audrey Giles from the University of Ottawa will be presenting her research. She's been in this area for many, many years now, researching how curriculum, swimming lessons, water safety often have limitations or bias from a white perspective. They're not diverse in their voices and how we reach different communities. Coming up next Friday, March 12th, we have person-centered, person-directed approach to recreation programming. So not only looking at seniors, but looking at individuals with different needs as to how we can meet them one-on-one and saying how we can accommodate their programming needs by not just offering aqua fitness, that there's not just one narrow range of opportunities for these different demographics. Reminder also that on Tuesday nights, we have our Ready, Set, Get Social on Zoom. So if you want to come out and connect with myself, Rashona, Julia from Aqua Essence Swim Academy, Winnipeg, Manitoba, we've got prizes, games, different activities. Those links are also available on our website for the POOLaide webinars. And then also here and there, I'll be adding in some different Instagram or Facebook Lives this month with some individuals who didn't really have a whole session to present, but we've got some different topics to cover. So thank you everyone for being here today. Thank you to those of you that entered the giveaway on Instagram. I will be looking at the comments after I get off and figuring out who was in the webinar, who did their comment for the prize, and I'll follow up via email for that. If anybody is interested in the merchandise, we do have that available to help support the webinars. That is directly on our website. I'll post a link in the chat box. The recording from today's session will be available. It will take us approximately 1 week, so give us a little bit of time to get that uploaded. Thank you. Have a great weekend. Thanks for being here today. If you have any questions, I will be here for a few more minutes, but I appreciate your time and you coming out today.